Our story today will take us to meet two totally opposite people, whose paths will end up meeting in the most unexpected way to teach them that in life there is always more than one point of view and that mistakes can be the best way to start over. Amanda Ross was a young, rich, powerful, and despicable woman. And perhaps it is this last quality that best describes her and what most people, even those who claim to be her friends, use to refer to her and her particular way of being. Since her childhood, her family taught her that the only people who deserve respect and recognition are those who hold a position of power and handle large amounts of money. Her family possessed one of the largest fortunes in all of Chicago, with her father owning one of the most influential companies in the entire country. It was to be expected that his only daughter, who was spoiled as much as possible by her parents, would grow up feeling superior to the rest in all circumstances. The poor and homeless should be banned in this country. I don't understand why they are allowed to sleep on the streets. They don't give a good image of the city, and looking at them is really unpleasant. In my opinion, they should be extinguished, or the government should create some place to send them to in order to prevent them from mixing with the people who do deserve respect and appreciate the real pleasures of this world. She stated one morning while enjoying brunch with her friends. No one dared to contradict her, and they nodded vigorously at everything she said without any personality. In fact, it could be said that in her 32 years of life, Amanda Ross had never had to debate anyone's opinion of things. Her word was the only valid one, and no argument was possible. And if you did, you'd better not share it out loud, or in front of anyone who knew her and would process loyalty to her, because then you'd be in big trouble. But all that was about to change, and Amanda's reign was about to end, and it would do so at the hands of the people she despised most in this world, the poor. Although the real problem was that the person she had to face was not who she believed. But by the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. And this is where the second protagonist of our story, Mr. Max Daly, comes into the picture. A quiet, humble, and selfless person who has little or nothing in common with someone as petty and superficial as Amanda Ross, but who, by the vagaries of fate, will end up meeting her and changing her life completely. It all started on a Thursday night. It was one of those days when it's neither hot nor cold, and spring invites you to dine out to enjoy the night scenery of the beautiful city of Chicago. Max was one of those people who hated crowds and preferred solitude, dining in his modest dining room with the only company of his dog and his favorite television program. However, that day he let himself be infected by the spirit of youth and felt like treating himself. And not just any treat, because he had asked for a table for dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. A day is a day, and it's been a long time since I've indulged myself. I feel like eating something I didn't cook myself, the man said to himself as he dressed and looked at the broken mirror in his small bathroom. His life in the last few years had not been easy. He barely made ends meet and jobs didn't last more than 6 months, but he always managed to get by. Lately, he was getting lucky, and his latest job as a museum janitor was lasting longer than expected, which had allowed him to save a little money and have the privilege of treating himself to dinner out. The first time in over 16 years. The occasion was worth making an effort, and Max was thrilled at the thought of sitting down to dinner surrounded by society's elite and delighting in tasting food cooked by a Michelin-starred chef. It was impossible to imagine what was going to happen during that dinner and the person this humble man would end up becoming by the end of the night. Max arrived punctually at the restaurant at 7 o'clock sharp and sat at the table he had reserved, which happened to be the farthest from the rest of the tables that were distributed in the center of the room and was next to the window overlooking the back street. But he didn't care in the least where his table was located. "That nonsense is for the rich," he thought, and sat down contentedly at his table as he began to leaf through the menu. As he sat down, Max noticed the prying eyes of all the diners already in their months, and some of the staff. In particular, those of a young, wealthy woman who was dressed as if she were attending a movie awards gala. He was used to that kind of stares and just ignored them, and continued reading the menu calmly. Unfortunately, the menu turned out to be a collection of dishes he had never heard of, and the price for all of them was outrageously expensive. So Max decided to play it safe, and ordered lobster soup and a glass of the cheapest red wine he could find. The waiter was surprised and asked if he wasn't going to order anything else. Max laughed politely and told him that he didn't have much of an appetite that night. It was clear that the waiter didn't believe him by the way he looked at him, but he didn't want to talk about it any further, and after writing it all down in his little black notebook, he left. "I don't know why you are surprised to order lobster bisque. Most of the people dining here don't know what it's like to have a full stomach. The portions at these restaurants are a joke," thought Max, as he looked around at the rest of the diners at their tables. They all seemed to have noticed his presence and were looking at him as if a chimpanzee had snuck into the restaurant. Max hadn't bothered to dress up to go to that fancy place, and he knew he would be the center of all the criticism for showing up in his old, dark green blazer, a faded pair of jeans that were a little baggy, and his only leather shoes with a worn toe cap. Everyone there despised his poor taste in fashion and was sure they considered him an outsider, but he didn't mind in the least. 10 minutes later, the waiter had returned with a steaming bowl that he set gently on their table. Max couldn't help but make a comment about the small amount of soup in the bowl. "Oh boy, maybe I should have ordered some meat. That way I was sure to have something visible for dinner," said in an amused tone Max, trying to make the waiter laugh. But he didn't succeed. His innocent joke about the soup would end up unsettling the waiter, who clicked his tongue and told him as nicely as he could that the important thing about the dish was its taste and the excellent presentation by Chef Gabriel Renoir. But the waiter was not the only snob in the room who would be annoyed by Max's comment. And it turns out that just 4 tables away from where he was sitting was our other protagonist, Amanda Roos, who happened to have a dinner date with her club of more select friends. Amanda hadn't lost sight of Max since she had stepped over the threshold of her favorite restaurant. As soon as she saw him, her whole body shuddered and a puff of disgust rose to her mouth, as if she had just opened a garbage can full of spoiled food. When Max sat down to read the menu, Ross didn't miss the opportunity to duly inform the rest of the diners who were lucky enough to join her on that beautiful evening, making all sorts of disparaging remarks about the look of his clothes or the lack of class of the restaurant for letting individuals like that one sit just a few feet away from people as respected as she was. What a shame. I have never seen anyone so poorly dressed. Do you think he will sleep on a bench in the street or in one of those alleys full of cardboard lying on the ground?" she asked aloud at her table. The whole table broke into laughter, looking cheekily over to where Max was standing, who at that moment was waiting for the waiter to return with his dinner. The volume of her voice was loud and seemed to be increasing as the minutes passed, and she had time to think of new ways to insult this mysterious man who, according to her, had been lucky enough to be invited by the restaurant as a nice act of charity. Amanda kept looking at Max's table with disdain to let him know that he was not welcome there and that he had better hurry up and leave. The Renoir restaurant was his territory, an exclusive place for exclusive people, and he had no place in it. For his part, Max tried as hard as he could to ignore the nasty rich woman, who hadn't stopped giving him looks of hatred and disgust since he had sat down. However, the comment about the lobster bisque was too much for Amanda's pride. She couldn't take it anymore and decided to act on her own and do what was right. What Amanda could not have imagined was that it would be precisely that boldness and vanity that would end up bringing her down just a few minutes later. After the unfortunate incident of the prank with the waiter, Ross got up from his table and walked briskly over to the table where Max was trying to take a sip of his soup. But no one would be dining that night. Not even the chef. Because what was going to happen next would bring the entire restaurant to a complete standstill. You should be ashamed of yourself. To talk like that about such an exquisite dish prepared by the best chef in town. How dare you? It is clear that people like you are not prepared to enjoy good food. I don't know why such a prestigious restaurant has allowed you to dine at one of their tables and for free. Really, this city is getting worse and worse. Please, if you are not going to appreciate the taste of the food, I invite you to leave the way you came and return to your home. If you have one to go back to, said Amanda, with all the contempt she could muster. A murmur went through the dining room, and then there was silence. Now everyone was looking at them, including the waiters and the other staff members who had overheard what Amanda had just said. No one dared to say anything, and they looked expectantly towards Max's table, waiting for any kind of comment or reaction in response to such a comment. But what they got was something very different, and it wasn't the response Amanda was expecting, not by a long shot. Something much better. Max was aware that all eyes were on him, and he also knew that what that woman had just said to him would also be on everyone else's mind. But he didn't care. The unexpected comment from that wealthy young woman did not surprise him, nor did it even make him angry. In fact, he felt sorry for her, and for all those who shared her sad and selfish way of looking at the world. His hunger was gone. He set the spoon aside on the side of the plate and wiped his lips with the napkin. He knew he had to respond, otherwise it was very likely that he would end up on the street, and everyone would end up believing that he was really a homeless man who had snuck in through the back door of the restaurant. After a minute of silence that seemed like an eternity, Max gently rose from his seat, and after clearing his throat slightly, looked the woman who was insulting him in the eye for the first time. He had already noticed that this woman was looking at him with hatred and disdain since his arrival at the restaurant, but he had not stopped to observe her carefully. In doing so, Max realized that she was still a child, a spoiled young woman who had not had to face any problems in her life, and who believed she possessed a series of privileges that the rest of the Humility were unaware of. Poor rich girl, thought Max, chuckling under his breath. Amanda stood in the middle of the room, looking haughty and anxiously waiting for the man to eventually admit his mistake, apologize to everyone for his rudeness, and leave through the back door. But nothing of the sort happened. In fact, maybe she was the one who would end up walking out the back door that night. "Excuse me, miss, but I was trying to enjoy my dinner. I don't think I could have offended anyone by that," Max began by saying in a kind tone. "But you know what? I'm not hungry anymore. You and your group of friends who think you are the kings of the universe have managed to spoil my appetite with this delicious soup. Do you think I didn't notice how you looked at me? How you look at everyone you don't consider worthy of respect?" he asked, looking into her eyes with a serious gesture. In his eyes, you could see the pain in his every word. Amanda looked at him angrily, but didn't dare answer. Not yet. The restaurant was still silent. No one dared say or do anything. Max and Amanda had become the center of attention, but the show had only just begun. And you know what? I don't need anyone to give me their approval or tell me whether I can sit down to dinner in a restaurant. I have the same right as you do to enjoy the French cuisine of high society. That's why I'm here today, indulging myself. Because, believe it or not, I can afford to pay for my dinner. No one gave me anything for free, Max continued, gradually raising his tone. That's what they all say. But with those clothes, I don't think I could afford even that one glass of wine. I had heard about some restaurants in town offering free dinner for the homeless, but I never thought a place like the Renoir could stoop so low. Amanda replied with irony, pointing to the glass full of wine next to the bowl of soup. Giggles were heard coming from Amanda's table of friends as a sign of approval of what she had just said. But the laughs were about to end. That comment was the straw that broke the camel's back and ended Max Daly's patience. Max had held back until that moment and had tried to be polite to the woman. He didn't think it would be necessary to explain himself any further, but in view of what he had seen, he had no choice. Amanda had asked for it. You have no idea who I am, miss. You've judged me by the clothes I'm wearing and my humble appearance, but let me tell you, that doesn't tell you anything about what a person really is. Do you think you deserve respect? I don't think so. I have served this country for over 20 years and have risked my life for others so that people as fortunate as you can live comfortably and carefree. You live on your family's money, and you dare to point the finger at me? A war veteran who has saved more lives than there are inside this restaurant? Don't talk to me about respect, because then you will be the one who will have to leave this place. Max's words were calm, but in his face you could see the pain and tiredness they harbored. The same pain that Max carried like a slab inside his heart since he left the war. The restaurant was again filled with murmurs of astonishment at the startling revelation Max had just made. Amanda went pale, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel comfortable or confident. Her mouth had gone dry, and her palms had begun to sweat. She looked to the table for help or words of comfort, but only got silence and a reproachful look from those who a few minutes before had laughed at her every comment. But Max wasn't finished yet. Just in case anyone still doubted his story and did not believe it possible that this man had served in the army, he took a small purple and gold medal from the inside pocket of his jacket. It was a Purple Heart, the highest distinction that can be given to a soldier for having been a hero during his service. You see this? It is proof that my work has served to save innocent lives. I have fought and protected people in the most terrible circumstances, and I have seen horrors that none of you here can even imagine. Movies fall far short when it comes to war. It is hell, and you never get to forget what you experienced there. So please, don't tell me what I can and can't do, Max concluded. After saying that, and holding up the medal for everyone to see, Max put it back in his pocket and asked for the bill. He was looking forward to going home and forgetting that stupid incident. But it wouldn't be as easy as he thought it would be. After his speech, Amanda paled and seemed to have turned to stone because she did not move. Nor did she say anything to refute the poignant and wise words of the man she had just publicly humiliated. One of the waiters had left his tray on a table and started clapping shyly, and soon after he was joined by more and more people, until finally the whole restaurant was on its feet, showing its respects to a man who had worked for his country and all his countrymen. Max was not expecting such a standing ovation and was very moved. He nodded his thanks and shook hands with more than 20 people who had approached him to thank him for his service. He had never sought recognition, and his intention was to go unnoticed and enjoy a nice dinner. All this was unexpected, but it made him feel very happy that there were still people who appreciated a soldier's sacrifice. Even Amanda's friends, his loyal supporters who only 15 minutes earlier had openly laughed and insulted Max, now stood up to applaud him and acknowledge how wrong they were. Suddenly, everything had changed, and the reproachful glances towards that man dressed in worn and cheap clothes had been transformed into recognition and gratitude. Everyone seemed to be delighted with Max's presence there. Everyone except Amanda, who was overwhelmed by the situation and had never seen herself in a disadvantageous position in front of anyone. Now she was the one who was being looked down upon, and she felt an enormous desire to run away from there so as not to have to endure that embarrassment. But if she did, things would be worse for her. And Amanda knew it. Max's compassionate and humble attitude left her very impressed, and she realized how childish and unfair she had been to him. "You should be ashamed of yourself," laughing at a veteran like that. A very elegant woman, much older than her, who had stood up to pay her respects to Max, said disdainfully. That comment was too much for her. If there was anything Amanda liked more than money, it was recognition. And after that, she would not have it, and everyone would look at her with the same contempt as that woman. She felt awful for having behaved that way, and she knew that this man deserved all her respect. His speech had touched her heart and made her realize how lucky she was to have been born into such a wealthy family. So she decided to do what she would never have thought she would be able to do: apologize. Max had refused to dine for free, and after thanking everyone for their kindness and paying the bill, he headed for the exit, followed by a couple of waiters who were still clapping for him. But before he reached the door, Amanda stood in his way, forcing him to stop in his tracks. "Please wait a second," she begged him. Her face showed the anguish she was feeling. Max looked at her frowning, but decided to listen to her. "I hope you don't want to make fun of my jacket again," he said with an ironic tone. "No, please, I beg your pardon. I have been very cruel to you, and the things I have said to you have no possible justification. You are right. I have no idea what the word sacrifice means, and my parents have given me an easy and comfortable life, which has always made me feel better than others. But today, you have given me the most important lesson of my life that I will never forget. A person's wealth is in their heart and in the way they act, not in their money or looks. I am so sorry I was wrong about you today. You are a true hero," Amanda told him in a kind voice. Max watched her carefully, and in her eyes he found sincere regret. There was no trace of the vanity and contempt that he had showered on her as she entered the restaurant. Amanda was truly ashamed of her actions and wished to get his forgiveness. "Of course I forgive you. I too have been young and made mistakes. You have plenty of time to learn to be a better person, and I'm glad I was able to help you realize that. I wish you the best in life, from the bottom of my heart." And he said goodbye to her with a smile. Amanda stood there watching Max walk down the street, her heart heavy and a smile on her lips. That day would be the first in the new life of Amanda Ross, who after meeting war veteran Max Daly, would never be the same rich, capricious, and prejudiced girl again. The man's humility and sacrifice had given her a life lesson she would never forget, just as he would never forget her and her mouth-watering 5-star dinner at one of the most luxurious restaurants in the city. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.